try to steer it as straight as we can. Sometimes we collide with each other. Who is to blame and who's gonna fix the boat? Life, oh life, there's nothing to fear from your life. Let me know if I can be of any help. Life, you and I, let's try a fresh start today. What do you say? Let's close the door on the past. So we swim, and it is in so many ways just a little trick to keep our heads above water. But now I'm not afraid anymore. Life, oh life, there's nothing to fear from your life. Let me know if I can be of any help. Life, you and I, let's try a fresh start today. What do you say? Let's close the door on the past. Oh life, there's nothing to fear from your life.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the Drax Files radio hour live from Sansar. And today, my guest is Catherynne M. Valenti. And as I've been told, Catherynne M. Valenti, and please let me know on the YouTube chat or on the Twitch chat. We got a whole bunch of viewers. Let me peek out underneath the headset. I'm peeking out underneath the headset just to make sure that my audio is decent. Yes, yes, I got confirmation. All right, back in the headset. Catherynne M. Valenti, a sci-fi author, actually a fantasy author of fantasy books. And I don't know how I got in the attention of her work, or how I got introduced to her work. But this is the book Space Opera that we're going to be talking about. It's a New York Times best-selling book, and she just got a movie deal from Universal. And if you're on YouTube or on Twitch and you want to drop some names, please look it up. There is a bunch of people attached to the movie version of this book that are really big names. So I'm trying to fill airtime while while Catherynne is on the road to Sansar. Um, there's a bunch of people attached to this movie that are very, very talented. But since I don't watch any movies, since I only read books, I don't know any of these people. So enlighten the stream folks, and I hope that Catherynne will be here in a short time. And while we're waiting for her, please identify yourself in the stream, and I'm going to give you a little bit intro to the book. The book is called Space Opera. I'm parking my headset on my forehead right now. The book is called Space Opera, and it's basically about aliens invading the Earth and picking some washed up glam rock musicians to play in a galactic version of the Eurovision contest in order to prove themselves as sentient beings and basically play music for their survival, because the threat is that these aliens are going to annihilate and destroy the Earth if these humans are not proving that they're sentient, intelligent beings. And the way to determine that is by way of is by way of music. So let me read a little bit of an excerpt here while I'm monitoring my communication. I'm monitoring my communication here with Catherynne, who is on the way. Um, so the band is a three-piece. Okay. The funny thing is, how did this band that is then ultimately going to compete in this galactic version of the Eurovision contest, how are they going to be picked? Is probably your question. First of all, the book is awesome. The book is very much in the vein, and I think Catherynne will say that, in the vein of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I think she put this even in the credits at the very end, that she owes everything to Douglas Adams, the author of Hitchhiker's Guide. Uh, let's see here. Here's somebody in the chat. Sky Silver Web. I'm here. It's in the basement. Okay. So let me read you an excerpt, and this excerpt is at the very beginning of the book, where one of the band members, and his name is Decibel Jones, and that's of course his pseudonym. Decibel Jones. Oops. Why am I standing the other way around here? Not facing the camera. Here I am. My left arm is weird. Ah, VR. VR ready, but obviously this is not. So Decibel Jones is basically the lead band member, the singer, and his this is a pseudonym. So I'm going to read from chapter 3. It's called "Take Me to Your Heaven." And oh yeah, I got to preface this. So let me set this up. The band the band was huge. And then, as is the trajectory of pretty much any band except for, I guess, Metallica, disagree with me if I'm wrong, they sort of have a decline in popularity, and basically they split up, and then people do solo albums, and that's kind of where the book starts. So So they're doing solo albums, and one guy who has sort of the fortitude of saving some money during the fame goes back to sort of a civilian life, if you will. Um, Now, this guy, Decibel Jones, the lead singer, is the most eccentric of all of them, and he is an immigrant, which is another wonderful component. They're all immigrants. They live in England, but they all have an immigrant background, which adds another component that I'm not gonna get into much. I want Catherynne to comment on that. So let me read this excerpt here. Actually, maybe I should I put the book into my hand so you guys can see that? Ah, the book fell on the floor because my left hand. Here we go. This is real VR juggling right now. There's I don't have any assistance, so I'm reading the real book right now. Decibel Jones was passed out on the floor of his flat in a vintage bronze. And by the way, flat. Okay, so this is in England. Okay, so flat is basically apartment, right? Decibel Jones was lying passed out on the floor of his flat in a vintage bronze black Mech Queen bodysuit, surrounded by kebab wrappers, 400 copies of his last solo album, Autoerotic Transubstantiation, bought back from the studio for pennies on the pound, and half-empty bottles of rosé when the aliens invaded. Somehow he always thought it would be different. Oops, I lost my book. I lost my book. Jesus. See, such is the peril of doing a book presentation in VR. We're paving the road as we're driving on it. Hold on, hold on. Let me get back to the camera. Here we go. I'm just gonna read it. I'm just gonna read it here in real life. So somehow he always thought it would be different when the aliens invaded, and Decibel had thought about it rather a lot. His family had lived above a video rental shop in Blackpool during those delicate prepubescent years when any idle passing moonbeam, pigeon, or discarded air hockey puck can swell and shine with meaning on its way toward becoming a lifelong fetish. For his part, little Dinesh inhaled a heady, unleavened diet of science fiction films, despite his grandmother's insistence that they were neither halal nor anywhere near as good as Mr. Looney of the Tunes, as she called her favorite American program. He had spent many afternoons surrounded by siblings, slaloming through the furniture trying to convince his nanny, the very one who would drop her lemons in Piccadilly Square years later, that Alien was far, far better than Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny, far more serious and meaningful than a goofy, dumb cartoon, only to be hushed by a wave of, oops, by a wave of a brief lecture on her personal philosophy of pop culture criticism. Okay, reading in VR is not as easy as I thought it was. Now, I'm still waiting for. I am looking for Catherynne. I'm looking for Catherynne. She is not coming in. She's not coming
She's
in.
on her way down, Drax. She's up. She's just clicking on the link.
Somebody's talking to me. Somebody is talking to me. It's Andrew. Andrew to the
Yeah.
rescue. Okay, then I can read one more excerpt. And please, Andrew,
Yeah.
why do you have the secret? Listen, this is
No,
a.
it was to test it. It was to test it as we gave it to her, just to make sure it worked.
Oh my
Out of
God.
here.
You guys gave away the secret, super secret duplicate of this very basement that is only reserved for
I'm
utter
I'm
celebrities.
I'm running out of here now as quick as I can. Okay.
Um, okay, that gives me the opportunity to read another excerpt, and I think Ice Guy Silverweb is standing there. That's she should go back to 114 Harvest. Let me say that 114 Harvest is where people. Oh my God, I see Catherynne. I see she's coming in. She's coming in. She's coming in. Let me get the other. Let me get the other thing. Here she's coming in. She's coming in. Catherynne, come in.
Hi.
Hello, Catherynne.
Hello.
Hello. I mean, this is such is the peril of VR, the peril and the promise, shall we say, where
Yes.
we put together a super secret, hidden from all sight, protected by FBI, CIA, NSA, duplicate of our VR basement, and you went with the crowd. You went with the fans. It's like Metallica trying to get on stage, and they go to the wrong bathroom, and all of a sudden it's like, James, is that you? So welcome, Catherynne. Catherynne went into the 114 Harvest, which is of course the public experience where everybody is sort of having a watch party, and we built this duplicate not because we're afraid of the crowds or anything. It's just cutting down on lag, and it's a little bit of a more of a controlled environment. All right,
Sure.
Catherynne, thank you for coming.
No problem.
Now, I already read a little excerpt of the beginning where Decibel Jones is sort of lying on the floor and all that. That's where it really caught me, because your description of musicianship and the trajectory of self-involved of sort of this fragile, I don't know, self-confidence or whatever you want to call it, and then the catapult to fame and then falling down. So Catherynne M. Valenti is a are you a New York Times best-selling author?
I am. I'm a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author.
Oh my God, it's USA Today too? God damn it.
Space Opera was on the USA Today list actually, and my middle grade series was a New York Times bestseller.
I'm really terribly preparing for these interviews.
That's okay.
It's a
It lets
shame.
me. It lets me brag a little, so it's fine.
See how I throw this to you? I mean, this is obviously not Chris Matthews. Um, so you are a I think when we did a sound check yesterday, you called yourself a fantasy author. Now tell me a little bit how you got in there. Give me a little biographic sketch, and is this in fact your first foray into sci-fi? Would you classify yourself as being more at home with the fantasy genre, or how would you sort of self-classify? And let me add one more thing. While I'm looking at myself here, people know that people who watch this, they know that I read obsessively and I don't distinguish. And I'm going to start with this tiny little anecdote. My mother was a little bit of a snob. I say this with the utmost love. And when I was 12, 13, I got into Conan. And I bought all these Conan books, the original Robert E. Howard stories. But then, of course, the Conan saga was then written by all these other authors, Robert Jordan and L. Sprague, the Camp, and all these others. And there was one day I wake up in the morning and all these Conan books are gone. And I think I was 13 or 14. And I said, Mom, where are my Conan books? And she said, I threw them away because they're trash. And I was livid. And now that I have a 15-year-old son, and my mom, since we made up, of course, and I understand her fear now, that she just thought like, this is sort of inferior. But of course, I think we all agree is that getting young people to read anything is really the goal. And then when you get the reading bug, then you kind of slowly transition them maybe to a more sort of better, I don't know, better diet, if you will. And so, Catherynne, your book, the one I read, I haven't read anything else, is so good. It's so satisfying in terms of prose and of action and just wit, that it kind of combines everything, and I think my mother would approve. But again, back to back
Thank you.
to back to the original
My
question.
mother was a snob too, so.
Ah, so back to your question. Back to the question now. Who are you? Are you a fantasy author? Are you
Um,
just an author, or what are you?
So yes, so space opera is absolutely not my first science fiction novel, and certainly not my first uh, piece of science fiction writing. I did start out in fantasy, though. I've always considered myself a speculative writer. I write some horror, I write some fantasy, I write some science fiction, but I certainly got known for writing fantasy, and specifically for writing sort of folklore, fairy tale, mythology retellings. Wrote one called The Orphan's Tales, which was my first sort of big New York book, and it's kind of like a sort of Arabian Nights with a more modern sensibility. It's got those nested stories like Scheherazade's tales. And I wrote one called Deathless, which is a retelling of a Russian fairy tale set during World War II and the siege of Leningrad. And I wrote a middle grade series that started with a book called The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making.
That's
Um,
on my
and so
Goodreads list.
I did very much get known for my work in the fantasy field and for a certain sort of sensibility there. But I started writing science fiction early on. I think my first science fiction short story came out in 2009 or 2008. And I wrote a novella called Silently and Very Fast about AI, which was actually referenced at the CFI Minds conference in Cambridge today, which is very cool. Uh, and I went on writing a lot of different science fiction things. People kept calling it not science fiction. It's not really science fiction. My goal for so long has been to write something that nobody says it's not really science fiction, and space opera is the only one that's happened. So I wrote
So
an
that's
entire,
interesting. Sorry, so I
yeah.
gotta step in right there. I have a bunch of questions, but I gotta step in right there. So are you saying that that the relationship with the fans can be? Are you slightly sort of hinting at the fact that the relationship with the fans in terms of purity can be problematic, or how
It,
do you actually
I mean,
navigate that?
that's actually mostly critics, but there's certainly
Ah,
a few fans. I mean, I think it's partly because I'm a girl and my name is spelled funny, and so and I write about feelings. You've read space opera. There's
hmm
feelings all over it, so it's different. My last adult novel before this one was called Radiance, and it's also a science fiction book about silent movies in a alternate science fictional world.
hmm hmm
And that one got called Space Fantasy by Publishers Weekly. I'm like, I mean, I don't know, but I think space fantasy is science fiction. I don't write hard science fiction, to be fair.
hmm
There is always, I try to have as much of a scientific basis as I can for the stories that I want to tell. Silently and Very Fast was very based in real programming. There's several of the planets in space opera are based on real planets that we have observed. The Sagrada, the Elikon homeworld,
hmm
that's all black. It's the Vanta Black planet.
hmm
That's a real planet that we have observed through the telescope. So I do try to base it in some real science,
hmm
but I'm more concerned with the story than I am with the science. So I kind of understand why people say that. But nobody has said space opera isn't science fiction. So I
hmm
have achieved a life goal. Um,
So it's really just the
uh,
critics. They just tried it. I mean, they
yeah,
have a hard time kind of putting the name.
basically.
Let me interject real quick. People, the nitpickers on the Twitch stream are saying that you're not speaking into the microphone, and that's of course me as an audio
Hmm.
snob. It's another thing. I mean, my mother wanted to turn me into a literary snob, and meanwhile I became an audio snob. So may I kindly ask you, although we're in virtual reality, to step forward a tiny little bit and speak into the microphone. Jesus Christ, folks, lighten up.
Um, is that better?
No, no, no. I don't mean in the microphone at home. I mean in the virtual microphone right in front of you, visually speaking.
Oh, okay. I get it.
God
All
damn you
right.
nerds. Well, I had Kent by here from the Voices of VR podcast,
There we
and
go.
people may remember he microphone shamed me. He said, "Dragster, your microphones are too high. Your virtual microphones, they're not even like, my avatar's trying to speak into them." Anyways, we're getting off a tangent. Space opera is about Eurovision. I just read a little excerpt of it. Now you got I think you sold it to Universal, right, to make a movie,
Yep.
which is awesome. Congratulations.
Thank
Um,
you.
Now the when you embark on this, and I think you write it actually at the end there that your idea was okay. The initial concept is okay, Eurovision in space. I told you a couple days ago that for me, as a non-Eurovision fanatic, I'm agnostic towards Eurovision, frankly. I found it awesome because you depicted the life of musicians, how musicians sort of see themselves, the dynamics in a band, the dynamics through this this path from obscurity to success to then the VH1 behind the music type thing. It's so brilliant. How did you how did you get into the minds and the lives of these musicians, and um, how did you flesh this out? So when you have this idea, basically, what my question is, the process a little bit. You have an
Sure.
idea. There's Eurovision in space, and then how do you flesh it out, and how do you get the tone so spot on about this life of musicians, which I always believed was incredibly unique and super secret.
So I do want to say that you don't have to know anything about Eurovision to read this book. There are Eurovision Easter eggs, but if you've never heard of Eurovision, you'll be totally fine.
I
All the
concur.
chapter titles, yeah, all the chapter titles are names of Eurovision songs, but like they're just cool phrases if you've never heard a Eurovision song. All of the alien names and planet names and everything are from languages of the participating Eurovision countries. But if you don't care about that, they're just cool words. So you don't feel like you have to be a Eurovision fan to read this book. You don't. Um, Interestingly enough, that Eurovision in space thing, that's how I sold the book, and that's it. It was because I was live tweeting Eurovision on Twitter, and a fan of mine in Thailand said, "Ha ha ha! You should do a science fiction or fantasy Eurovision." And I was like, "Ha ha, that'd be funny." And then I got a DM from a Simon and Schuster editor who said, "I will buy that right now."
Oh my God. Okay,
And
guys, kids, you hear it here first. Okay, so this is the secret. Don't go into telemarketing. Don't watch Ty Lopez videos. It's not about the Lamborghini in the Hollywood Hills. It's about tweeting. It's about tweeting that you. That's awesome. Okay,
yeah, making
continue.
dumb jokes about Eurovision. So yeah, I agreed to do it. There was not even a title. Eurovision in space. That was it. That was like what was on the contract. There's nothing else. And I knew it was going to be February 2017 that I was going to have to write this thing, and I promptly just didn't think about it till February 2017, and then was like, now I have to make something of this. And honestly, I had no idea what I was going to do. I spent a week coming up with the name Decibel Jones and the Absolute Zeros. I have an entire notebook full of alternate names for the band members and the band itself. And then honestly, I sat down and I was like, I really don't know how this is going to go. And I started writing something about Enrico Fermi, and I was sort of off. That
Hmm.
first
The
chapter was the
Fermi
first thing I
paradox.
wrote.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that first chapter was the first thing I wrote, and that really gave me a tone for everything else. But when it got time to sort of write the musicians, now I know a lot of musicians. I am not one. I sing, but I am not a professional musician by any means. But I have toured with one.
Hmm.
There's a singer named S.J. Tucker, who's my sister forever, a wonderful person, and we used to do reading concerts together. She's done a couple albums based on my books, and we toured together doing like concerts where I would read and she would sing, but she's just one person. She's not a band. She can't break up with herself.
Hmm.
But I've known a lot of musicians, and that background as a fantasy writer, where I was sort of taking cliches, taking fairy tale stories, and then making them feel really immediate and real. Really did me in good stead for this, because I could take the sort of VH1 behind the music cliche story of a band breaking up and make it feel
Hmm.
intimate and real and very immediate to the audience. Because we talked about this yesterday. Like, breakups seem really personal.
Yeah.
They seem like something you own and only has ever happened to you.
Nothing
But in
ever
fact,
happened. Yeah, exactly.
nothing.
It's just
Yeah,
completely
in
unique
fact,
to me.
there's only a couple of ways that relationships and groups of people break up. And I remember coming home from writing the first sort of section about the band where they do their first gig, and giving it to my partner to read, and he was like, "Have you? When did you get into the music industry?"
But what is really so funny is also because I mean, this is we're talking about a trio, so you have actually a much more limited array of sort of these characters. But it's brilliant because one of them is more eccentric, and the other one is so brilliantly fleshed out stereotype of the one famous musician that kind of keeps it together, that is smart enough to put away a little bit of money while they're still famous. He doesn't get into super weird fetishes, and it's not ending up on in the tabloids, and so that dynamic between the two is incredibly important in the grand scheme of this narrative.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And my partner's brother had a band for a long time, and he sort of worked as a manager for them. So he really made me feel like I was doing a good job with it. But like as a writer, I've done collaborations as well, and collaborations fall apart in certain ways.
Hmm.
And though writers tend to, we tend to get our addictions are a little more subtle because we don't have arenas of 20,000 people screaming our names or anything like that, and we don't tend to do quite as many drugs because it's not the 80s anymore.
You can
Uh,
still take the subway. You're not getting recognized.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it's fine for writers, but I certainly understand the perils of needing that kind of attention and what happens when it's taken away.
Hmm.
And I think that people break in certain ways when they're sort of feeding to love and approval and attention and affection goes away.
Yeah.
And I was very interested in that, in what happens to a person when they're cut off from that
That
circle.
is really well explored because it's we all think and as we grow or I grew up on VH1 Behind the Music, we all understand how hard it is to perform for millions of people every night and get that love, and all of a sudden it's not a million, it's only 100,000. Then oh my God, what did I
Yeah,
do wrong? And,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
but you also now the other thing that is really cool about the book, by the way, I just want to remind people on the chat, you can, and people at 114 Harvest, there's a bunch over there. You can put your questions for Catherynne into the chat. If you're in 114 Harvest, you can
Yep, I'll see
IM
it.
me, right? Or you put it in the chat on YouTube, but you can also IM me in Sansar if you're on my friends list. One of the things that fascinated me, you describe all these extremely strange alien populations, and they're all incredibly unique. And I really don't want to get into detail. You guys really got to read this book. It's wonderful. Uh, but when I was reading it, and it's all about winning the contest. It's not about winning. It's about not losing the contest.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's important. But basically, the stakes are incredibly high in terms of sheer weirdness of offerings from these other alien beings. So I'm reading this book and reading like, whoa, these weird people, they're just basically they're like an infection on some other species, and the way they express themselves musically is through killing other people, and so it's not only just playing an instrument, the expression, I mean, you play with what is the definition of music, and then you kind of feel like, okay, this is going to have somewhat of a happy end. They're going to live, they're going to thrive, the earth is not going to be destroyed, but how on earth will the human species, what will they offer in this Grand Prix so that they don't lose when you have all this other stuff? I mean, how can they actually top this? And I'm not going to give away anything. I feel you topped it. I feel they topped it. But please step us through this process when you're writing and you're topping yourself in terms of just sheer craziness. How are you not getting totally panicked at some point? Like, how am I going to resolve this puzzle?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the very beginning, my partner was like, you have to write the song, right? Like,
Hmm.
how are you gonna
So we're talking
write the
about the winning
song?
song,
Like,
the song that doesn't
yeah,
lose,
like,
the winning
yeah.
song.
It's
Yeah.
like, how are you gonna do that? I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it right now. Like, I'm not there yet. Like, if I think about it, it's like that scene in Indiana Jones. If you think about it, you fall.
Yeah.
Um, and so I mean, I sort of had an idea of what to do early on, and I'm trying to skirt around it and not spoil it because my process of writing it is actually very similar to their process of writing it in the book, which
Hmm.
is that I had this idea, and then the closer I got to the end, the less it seemed enough,
Hmm.
the less it seemed like a good idea. Because as you point out, there's a huge array of alien species here. And it was very important to me to have it be
Hmm.
not like Star Trek, not just people with different foreheads, to have
Hmm.
them be genuinely very alien and
That's what I
very
was gonna
different
say.
and have,
Exactly, exactly. Really, I mean,
yeah,
let's just stress this point, folks. If you haven't read it, again, I mean, this is not the Drax Files Radio Hour. This is really an infomercial, and Catherynne is paying me, and Universal is paying me like really handsomely. This is pitch this, pimp this book. No, I'm a big fan, and you were able to create aliens that are so strange, that are so I mean, Douglas Adams would be proud of you. He would.
Oh, thank
What
you.
a shame that he's not, that he has
I mean,
passed.
he's my hero. I remember in college when he died, we went and threw a geranium off the top of the library in his name. Like Douglas Adams is a great hero of mine, and I hope that he would be proud. But a big part of all these aliens is, what they consider music, and what they consider music is so much better than what they do. They say in the very beginning, no, 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 humans are terrible at music. Like, it's cute what
Hmm.
you do, but
Hmm.
it's not like there's a species that uses their entire home world, the planet itself, as an instrument.
Hmm.
The Vorpret, who you mentioned, are actually an intelligent virus, and they infect people with spores, like and make them hear things. And there's all these kinds of music that are so far above what a human can do. And so the key to it comes from what we're doing here. That we're not just singing a song. We're
Hmm.
proving the sentience of humanity. That's the whole point here. Is
Hmm.
that they can't be sure that humanity actually is a sentient species, because we kind of suck in a lot of ways. And they want to make sure that the space monsters that they have found on this planet are not going to invade everybody. And
Right, in the
so,
very beginning, actually, when the aliens come in, I'm sorry to interject,
no,
the humans, in order to sort of be on the defensive, like, what do you mean we're not sent? We created the internet, and then the aliens say, "Are you sure you want to sort of bring forward the internet as an achievement?" I thought that was hilarious. Yeah. No, go ahead.
thank you. So, when it came right down to it, what I wanted was this scream of sentience. There's a whole little sort of motif going through it, that every great song has to have a screamy bit,
Hmm.
part that just comes from your soul. And so ultimately, a lot of things from the rest of the book come together in this moment of very extreme stress for the band on stage, where everything is going wrong and the equipment isn't working, and things, there's been sabotage and things haven't happened right, and it just ends up in this one very human moment, which is what a song is. A great song performed live is the most human of moments, and that's what I wanted to try and capture. And of course, writing about music is incredibly hard. It's
Hmm.
incredibly difficult to write about music. 5 notes of a song can make people feel what 20 pages of a novel can make them feel.
That's right.
So I tried really hard, and I cheated, and I used a little Christmas Carol, and I
I
used a
don't
little
think you
John
cheated. I
Lennon.
don't think you cheated because it's basically the again. Oh, we're somewhat spoiling now. Don't spoil too much. Don't mention Christmas.
Yeah, no,
But
I won't. I won't.
but what you said. I mean, it's about humanity. It's not about who is the best musician per se. It's about how do you represent this entire species in this sort of whatever, the pop music format, and that's brilliant, and that's what all these other species do as well. Now, how important did you think of this in the beginning, that all the band members of this band are immigrants? I think that's another really
Yes.
important thing that ties it into our really scary present, and it gives you opportunity to also kind of meditate a little bit on what it means to be
Yep.
human. So they all have an immigrant background. They're all in
So
England.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
go ahead.
it was very deliberate. They are all either first or second generation immigrants. They are all of a mixed. Actually, not, two of them are of a mixed background. One of them is Turkish, and it was very deliberate. It
Hmm.
was very somewhat something I thought really long and hard about, particularly because of Brexit and everything that's going on in England right now. Writing in the near future, I wanted to first of all. Decibel makes the point that they represent a pretty good spread of humanity going out into the galaxy to represent us. And given how many books there are about like the Great White Savior, I thought it was great to have a bunch of
Yes.
down on their luck immigrant kids who have had various experiences with being accepted and not accepted uh, in their new country, and different responses to that.
It's also very funny at the beginning when when sort of all the authorities realize, oh my God, there's the aliens. They're gonna annihilate us unless this weird band is gonna succeed. And then the MI6, MI5, or whatever, they're going like, wait a minute, these people are not even English. British and they're representing us, and it's so funny. It's so absurd. It's so absurd that the British authorities, kind of assume like, wait a minute, we are sort of in charge of sort of framing this thing while we're talking about humanity here. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I very much wanted to talk about that, and I knew early on because Eurovision itself has this dark history,
Hmm.
which is that it was invented after World War II to bring the continent back together after having annihilated itself over the course of a couple of decades. And I genuinely think that's one of the greatest things humanity's ever done. Just like, let's sing it out. And you can see right now, like when you watch Eurovision right now, you can see politics being worked out. It's always a snapshot of European politics. Russia last year even refused to compete because of this whole political thing with Ukraine.
Hmm.
And Ukraine the year before had won with a song called 1944, which is even though technically you're not supposed to have political songs in Eurovision, song's called 1944, and it's about Russians murdering Ukrainians. And so there is this darkness and this politics at the core of Eurovision. So there was always going to be a political angle to space opera. It had to. And I wanted to talk about what's happening in our world right now because it's happening to me. It's happening to everyone. It was on my mind so much. And so I wanted to write this bright, shiny book that was funny and colorful and full of glitter that at its core had this acknowledgement that we're heading into kind of a dark place. And so is England, and so is everyone. And so it all kind of circles around why the band broke up, which is revealed later on, and what has happened to all of these people and to their families and their different responses to their immigrant experiences, and all of it coming together to be part of this song. And so, yeah, it was very deliberate. Very early on, I knew that was going to be the case. I also I really love the fact Decibel Jones is
Decibel Jones'
Pakistani.
real life name is Dinesh
Jalo.
Jalo. Yeah,
Jalo. Yeah, so he is
he's the singer.
Pakistani Nigerian on his mother's side and Welsh Swedish on his father's side. So he's quite a large spread. But I loved the idea of somebody of that ethnic background getting to be the swaggering David Bowie rock star. Like it's so much harder for someone who doesn't look like David Bowie to get that kind of fame. I loved being able to have that kind of character at the forefront. And it's been really lovely to see him so embraced by everybody.
That's really brilliant because I see this like I'm bringing up Metallica again, but as a big sort of metal fan that my friends know, it's fascinating to see, for example, the Iron. I'm going completely off a tangent, but I keep it tight, folks. I know, don't send me hate mail. When I see the Iron Maiden documentary, for example, when they fly with their plane. All over the world, when you see Iron Maiden fans from other countries, how big of an impact, how big of a unifier this style of music really is. It's just amazing. And then when you extrapolate, like you said, if you are of non-British descent and you want to kind of play in this genre, there's a lot of stories where even within the big tent of heavy metal, for example, just to pick one, what is really depressing to me that there is incredible, yeah, frankly, racism going on where
Yep.
people go like, you can't be part of this, and they say, yo, why? Because I have a brown skin. In the old days it was, yeah, you have to have long hair and stuff like that. But that's always really depressing. So another big kudos that you kind of weave
Yeah.
this into the narrative here.
Well, and it's important it's not just a demographic tick box. Decibel's relationship with his grandmother is super
That's how you got the
informs
movie
everything that
deal.
happens.
That's how you got the movie deal. Kids, you're here to hear first. If you want to get a movie deal, just put in some Pakistani dude.
Just put in a Pakistani dude who is pansexual and non-binary gender. That is just the way to the top. Actually, I mean, I find it amazing that people, for the most part, haven't even commented on that. It's just not even a big deal. That's like a huge step forward to me.
Yeah. No, I find it really important.
This book has been a bestseller and it got a huge movie deal and everything, all around a character that is completely different than most protagonists for science fiction. And I really love that. And I love that it's not a big deal that's trumpeted from the rooftops. Decibel just is who he is. And that's great to me.
I find it incredibly important having married into or having created a mixed race family, if you will. A lot of things for me as a white guy are new. I mean, I used to think that I was, cognizant, woke, and all that,
Well,
but when you see it firsthand, then it's a different thing. You know what? Let me get the headset off. I want to read a little excerpt here because what I found hilarious is how you incorporated Clippy. Now, what for the kids out there, folks, for the young readers, can you
I mean,
brief?
Clippy still
What is
exists.
Clippy? Yeah, she does.
So
He,
Clippy
she,
is
whatever.
Microsoft's Office assistant, and
Hmm.
Clippy is a grand old man these days. Like he's been around a long time, and he pops up and says, "It looks like you're trying to write a letter or an essay. Do you need help with that?" And everybody finds him annoying and clicks him away immediately. And coming to write that scene, I knew that I wanted to have an AI species, that like for me, that's the demographic tick box. Like, gotta have AI in there.
Hmm.
But I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with them. I knew I wanted to do something sort of different than I'd seen before. They're called the 321. And so the idea was that they had looked through all of the cultural information they had on humanity and uh, picked an image to create a body to interface with humans, an image from their history that represented like helpful, cheerful service that could never possibly hurt them, that could never be threatening in any way, that could never annoy anybody. In their mind,
Hmm.
the Clippy is this proto AI that just existed to help humanity. And of course, our resident humans do not react to that the way they are expected to do. I have to say, I love how much everybody's loved Clippy because I came home from writing that going, oh my God, it's either brilliant or it's the stupidest idea I've ever had in my life.
I think Russell
And I
Brand,
still like
Russell, that,
until people started reading it, I don't even think I knew which.
that's funny because that reminds me of a Russell Brand interview where he once said like, or some interviewer asked Russell Brand like, "Oh my God, you sound so enthusiastic about your stuff. I mean, is that part of your success?" And he says, and Russell Brand says something like, "Yeah, the problem in my mind, like I have a strong feeling about this idea. The biggest problem is if it's the same feeling, no matter if the idea
Yeah.
turns out to be really good or really shitty."
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So the 321 is a species. They are basically computer code, right?
Yeah, they don't
Yeah.
actually they have transcended the need for corporeal bodies. So
Hmm. Hmm.
they have some loose sort of orbital storage, but they don't need bodies. But they basically 3D printed one in order to
Hmm.
compete in the Grand Prix and in order to interface with humans because they didn't expect that the new species would react well to a coffee cup talking because they could be anything that they wanted to be.
Right. So I'm going to read this little excerpt. So basically, the 321 species, they, as you said, they scanned the human's brains and go like, okay, here's an entity that kind of evokes calmness and authority in a good way. So they manifest as Clippy. And here we go. The erstwhile Microsoft Office assistant looked very near tears because Ort here, the band member, says Clippy is a cunt. Then, then Clippy says, printing a high capacity three-dimensional corporeal interface isn't easy for us, you know. We have almost transcended the need for gross physical storage. We can't just conveniently roll out of bed in a nice wash and wear body like the rest of these gooey bastards. Inasmuch as we have any home, we live in the satellite graveyards of the Udo cluster on the gorgeously data-rich router clouds of asteroid archipelago 192.168.11. Clippy lifted his eyes yearningly toward the sky. He spread his wires as if to express the ultimate impossibility of making oneself really understood. We coast on glittering streams of limitless signal strength. We do not fear the existential void of packet loss. We call no battery master. Our language is faster than light, and our music is faster than dark, and we recognize no God but the incremental system update. Our capacity for mimetic exchange and creative profanity outstrips even the monastic keepers of the seven sacred worlds on planet Tit. What we can. Okay, I'm gonna stop here because I love this stuff, and I can hear about 10% of my audience going like, "Yeah, Dragster." But you know what? This is absolutely fantastically awesome. This the way the what were the alternatives of Clippy? What were why how did you?
Nothing. It popped into my head. Like honestly, sometimes there is an elaborate story for why something is the way it is, and sometimes there isn't. And this is just one of those times where I knew I wanted a scene with the 3-2-1. What am I going to do with the 3-2-1? And it just appeared in my brain, and I was like, "Oh, this could be really bad,
I want to
or
read
it
this.
could be great."
We
So
in
I'm just going to write it and hope for the best.
we invent here. Clippy says we inventor we inventoried your technological output over several decades and chose to manifest our physical form as this non-threatening primitive AI from your recent digital history. We calculated a high probability of quickly developing rapport in this body, mutual sympathy, brotherly love. You could not possibly have any negative associations with this being. The entity you call Clippy existed solely to help and guide the user through an intricate and unfamiliar program designed to output concise, coherent representations of complex concepts. This is so beyond brilliant. And you know why? I just listened to Corey. Oops, what happened?
The sounds just cut out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Oh,
went
sorry. There we go.
here
You're
we go.
back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, you know why this is so brilliant? Because it also plays with this. Um, why this resonated with me? It's because, well, very obviously, here is something that has been created to be a again, it's a proof of intelligence, of that we are an intelligent species, but it was an overlay of a technology that made matters infinitely worse. I was just reading Corey Pine's book about Silicon Valley, and he talks about it's a nonfiction book. I'm going to have him on in a few weeks, but it talks about sort of this progress from Silicon Valley that's been sold to us, and in many ways it makes matters way more complicated and frankly annoying. Anyways, I'm going off this tangent again. Um, Now, what I wanted to ask you is, you write books, okay,
Hmm?
in
Yep.
a audiovisual in a world of complete, overwhelming power of audiovisual entertainment. Now, I am a father. You are a soon to be a mother. I don't want to spill
Yep.
too many beans, but
No,
I
no, I'm
just
6 months pregnant,
there
so
you
I
go.
am going to be a mother of a little boy soon.
Awesome.
My
We
own little decibel.
the, the children are here to save us. I know that's a lot of pressure. It's just like putting the pressure put on Decibel Jones at the absolute zeros. The children are here to save us. How how do you? And I'm going back to my mom, who was concerned that I was sort of going down a rabbit hole with inferior literature. I mean, that was 30 years ago. We're now talking about a whole bunch of other rabbit holes, which are a lot more scary. You as a writer, how would you how what is your place? Is literature still relevant? Is writing relevant? How do you get people back to reading? It's a whole bunch of questions rolled into one. Take it where you
Well,
will.
apparently you get people back to reading by calling Clippy a cunt. Uh, but, um, is literature
And you
relevant?
didn't even
Of
have to
course it's
apologize for
relevant.
that like
No,
Samantha Bee.
I know, I know. I talked to my editor. I was like,
That's pretty good. If you were on
I
TV, if you had a
was like,
TV show, it would
do
be
I need to tone it down because they are British people? Like the word is received very differently in Australia and the UK, and I lived in the UK for a while, and I was very sensitive about that word before I moved to Scotland, where it's a friendly greeting. So I feel
were
differently
you
about it now.
cunt?
But
Would you like some haggis?
no, like how you doing, you fucking cunt? Like it's normal. Like it's just a normal word that people say. Whether that's good or bad, it got very normalized to me, so I didn't have trouble using it. Um, Is literature still relevant? Of course it is. My God, I hope it is. I don't have a job otherwise. No, stories are always relevant, and the fact is that we read more text now every day than anybody in the history of humanity. We read text constantly. We almost all do it for a living. We do it for fun.
Yeah, but
We are
we don't do it
constantly reading
for
text.
pleasure. I'm sorry, I gotta jump in here.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't have
some
any
people do.
statistics, but yeah, no, I know what you're saying, but I'm talking specifically as a father of a 15-year-old who I read with, and I have this privilege to be fairly flexible with my time, so we read together, and he actually really enjoys it. But most of his peers are going like, "Oh my God, this is assigned for school, so I gotta read it," and everything they do outside of what they have to do is audiovisual entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's amazing good stuff out there. There's good games. I'm not one of the people who say, "Oh my God, video games are destroying culture." Not at all. But there's an imbalance here, and I'm just struggling with,
Oh, I
uh,
mean,
you
you
know,
understand that those
Dr.
video games
Valenti, are you
and
not my shrink? Can you help me?
no, I mean, yeah, those video games and those movies and everything, they are still written by people. They are still often stories, although single player games are sort of not trendy right now. So we're sort of steering away. But I think we will still steer back towards it. The fact is that people are never going to stop telling stories. Because I do write middle grade as well, which is books for 10 to 14-year-olds. I travel
Mhm,
to schools and I talk to kids a lot. Uh, and the fact is that kids still read. They do.
mhm.
And in fact, a big issue, huge issue that people talk about in the middle grade world is reluctant readers, is how to get people to read. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of what they mean by reluctant readers is boys. Girls read a lot.
Oh
It is
yeah, yeah,
much
yeah.
harder to get
Oh
boys
yeah.
to read.
Yep.
And so, we're all sort of trying to figure out how to get everybody reading because it is good for you and it is pleasurable and it is one of the greatest ways to teach empathy
Hmm.
because you learn to
Hmm.
identify with characters that are not like yourself. And that is something we all need practice with.
But I think it's also a
Um,
way to commit. I mean, I always say,
it is a way to commit,
you
and
commit
and
and
I think
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think that because there's so thing about a book is you never know what is going to get people to read. Would you before Game of Thrones came out, as the book series came out in the 90s, you would never have predicted that that was going to be a huge hit.
Hmm.
And these books are huge and they're long and they're complicated and they have,
Hmm.
antiquated language in them. And you wouldn't necessarily assume that this was going to be the cultural touchstone of a particular generation, but they are. So
Hmm.
people say, oh, write shorter books, write shorter chapters. But then sometimes the big long books are huge hits. You can never tell. The fact
That's a
is that,
really good point, yeah, because people also on the internet used to say, long form journalism is dead, and that's
yep,
also not true because there's
not true at
actually,
all.
it's a niche that is doing pretty well. And I mean, it's a niche, but who cares? I mean, we're
Yep.
fragmented as it is, and as long as you have this niche that works for that audience, that's actually, I actually believe that it's much richer culture that way.
But but people always want stories. It is the
Hmm.
great human activity to tell each other stories. When I'm at schools, I talk to kids about how you come into school every day and you talk to kids about the game you played last night or what you watched on TV and you're telling them a story about yourself and you have a
Hmm.
certain number of goals when you tell these stories and whether that's making yourself look cool or better at the game you're playing or making yourself look a little bit less cool if you're popular so that people like you more because people tend to like react badly to people who are too cool. There's a lot of different goals you have when you tell a story about yourself. Everybody tells stories all the time.
Hmm.
And even if you set aside that, you need something to base all that audiovisual entertainment on, literature and stories are one of our oldest activities as humans. Will it change? Will the format change? Will what people enjoy change? Will the medium change? Will it all go to ebooks? Yeah, probably at some point. But we've adapted before. The novel is actually not that old a format
Yeah.
when it comes right down to it. I mean, it is. It was invented in the 11th century, but the popular novel is only about 200 years old.
Yeah.
And yes, things will change, but the fact is that there's always a new hit book. People are still reading, and you can always get people to read again. And the rise of audiobooks has really allowed so many more people
I,
to enjoy fiction than they used to because everyone has a commute, everyone has a boring cubicle. Like, audiobooks have opened up the world of fiction to a lot of people who had stopped reading.
That's awesome. And actually, there's a comment here on YouTube. Shyla, the super gecko. I'm calling her by her second life name. Shyla, who is a big protagonist of my documentary, says living with CPCI. Please spell it out, Shyla, that we know what you're diagnosed with. Living with CPCI. Glad this is available as an audiobook. That is wonderful. I have nothing against audiobooks, but no Dragster program would be complete without me saying that I am working in audiovisual entertainment myself. The biggest awesome end of the day for me is to actually read a paper book, and that's what I meant with commitment, to committing to the single tasking sort of ritual of turning the page and all that kind of stuff is it's just for me it's important. I just want to throw that out there.
Well,
I've
I
nothing
will
against audio.
I will
You know,
put in a
I want
I will
to.
put in a plug.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
will put in a plug for the audiobook because the person who narrated it is in fact my partner,
Ah,
Heath Miller, who's an actor and a voice actor. And so the person reading the book is probably the only person in the world who loves this book more than I do. And
awesome.
he does different voices for every alien, and it's just incredibly wonderful.
Ah,
So the audiobook is really great, and it talk to anybody who's in audiobooks, and it's a peculiar thing that while everybody is worrying about the state of fiction, audiobooks have been booming for several years now.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say on Twitter, Highness T says, "Will Dragster play the voice of Clippy in the movie?" Well, I mean, if there's an open audition, I'm certainly gonna throw in my tape. As an experienced audio dude. I was gonna say that in terms of audiobooks, quick anecdote, because here on the table is Xijing Liu's Three Body Problem, and I was filming in California, and when I finished the Three Body Problem, I was in Salinas, and I had to drive to LA, and was going like, oh my God, I need to read The Dark Forest, which is the second part of the series. So I was looking like, is there an audiobook? Is there an audiobook? And then, yeah, I got the audiobook, which is very good, of The Dark Forest, second part. And so I drove down, and in Santa Barbara, I pulled over and I I bought the book in a bookstore. Drove down, checked in the hotel, and picked up right there. So what I'm saying is,
There's one book I've done that with, yeah.
you can
Where
combine
I
it,
like,
right? You can combine it
yeah, oh
actually.
yeah.
Yeah, why
There's
not?
one book that I was reading. I was listening to the audiobook on my commute, and it was so good, and I was so into it. But like, I wanted to get through the story faster. The reader was too slow, so I went and bought the book and finished it myself. And it's still one of my favorites, which is Pattern Recognition by William Gibson.
Oh my God, it's in the shelf. Jesus Christ,
It's so good. It's one of
is
my
it really
favorites.
good? Okay, then
It's really good.
I'll bump it
Yeah,
up on the list.
I think it's Gibson's best book.
Okay. Okay, your word in God's ears. I'll bump it up on the list. It's down on number 10 right now. I still have to finish some German stuff from the 1800s, some really like old stuff. Now, we're coming up at the top of the hour. How did you get just a couple of quick questions. You mentioned you studied or lived in Scotland. This book
Yep.
is in England. It has an in English. I mean, it has British
Yep.
participants, but it also has this tone. So how was that? Was that very difficult to get that tone? Did you have someone sort of proofread if you're in the real vernacular? Is your partner British? How
He's
did you?
Australian.
Oh my God!
But so my friend calls it Brit face, writing as though you're British. So here's the thing. So not only did I live in the UK for a while, and I went into this knowing, all right, if I'm going to write a Eurovision book, the
Hmm.
protagonist can't be American.
Hmm.
America doesn't participate in Eurovision. Has to be a country that participates in Eurovision. Well, the only one of the Eurovision countries I've lived in long enough to feel like I could be authentic with it is the UK.
Hmm.
It's also kind of a funny joke because the UK never wins Eurovision. Everybody likes to give them no points. As far as the UK will never win Eurovision anytime in the near future. I'll just put it that way.
Why?
So it's kind of a Eurovision Easter egg that the
Wait a
UK
minute.
is
Why? Why?
representing
Why?
us.
Why? Are they so bad?
No, they're not. Well, I mean, they are kind of, but it's politics. It's especially now after Brexit, they're never going to win. But it's politics. It's the UK always has considered itself kind of separate from Europe and
Yeah, yeah.
superior to
Of
it,
course.
and of course the colonial history, and it's just a thing. It's like a meme kind of.
Hmm.
So I knew it was going to be UK protagonists. I wanted to also have them be working class protagonists. That was important to me. And so I went into it knowing that I could do an okay job. I could do a pretty good job of writing that, having had a lot of experience in that part of the world and having grown up on a lot of British culture. My partner is Australian and his father is from Liverpool, so I did have him
Ah,
proofread it for loose Americanisms that might slip in there, because it's more than just substituting flat for apartment and lift for elevator. You know, it's more than that. So
you
I
are
I hope that I did a
basically
good job.
you are base.
I
Oops.
A friend of
Go ahead.
mine messaged me as she was reading it. She was like, "I cannot believe you picked the Hope and Ruin that is my local pub," and took a picture of herself in front of
Oh
that
wait, that
pub.
is a real pub. That's a
Oh,
real
it's a
pub.
real pub. It
Oh my
is. And
gosh.
I went looking for it. I went looking for a pub in Brighton that had live music and was not as good as it had once been. I picked it because that name is amazing. Um,
Oh my God. I should really. I mean, okay. So this is
it's
a little Easter egg for
there's
some
I
of the
mean
people.
almost everything in there is that's in the UK is real. Like it's all
Oh my God.
they're
So
real places.
so folks on there's a prominent content creator in the Sansar community who used to play in a band called Peter and the Test Tube Babies, and I'm not going to say who it is. You can follow the breadcrumbs. He's a good friend of mine, and he is from Brighton originally. And if you're watching this, dude, go to the pub and take a picture right now. Um, so that's fantastic. So you're basically
Yeah.
the Terry Gilliam
Yeah,
of
I'm faking
science.
it real good.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so you know, it was important to me to be as authentic as I could with the Britishness of it, and of course, there is that whole wonderful tradition in British science fiction of the deadpan protagonist facing all of these aliens and things like that.
Hmm.
And you know, I took a lot of inspiration from like Vince Noir's character in The Mighty Boosh and a
Hmm.
few other, and you know, this is Spinal Tap, which is a bunch of Americans pretending to be British.
There you go. There is
But
actually yeah, you're right. There is actually
yeah,
a big tradition of that.
yeah. So, you know, I wasn't, I think part of it was I wasn't, it isn't British just to be British. It isn't British because, you know, I have an American inferiority complex and British people are, you know, clever and smart and all that. It's British because of the history of rock in Britain. It's
Yeah,
British because of the Eurovision joke. And it's British because I'm not having a bunch of Americans up in my Eurovision.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. And, you know, I knew, especially with them being British, and after I wrote that first chapter, I knew the Hitchhiker's Guide comparisons would come in. And that was nerve wracking, you know, turning in this manuscript and going, like, I hope that I did a good job.
Cultural appropriation.
But I mean, what I did though is I created these British protagonists, and it is a very kind of English Wodehouseian tone. But I got my gross American feelings all over it.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, I don't
Yep.
think Douglas Adams would ever write anything as ultimately sentimental and feelsy as space opera is.
Absolutely. Oh, you're so right. That is actually, and that's the best. That is the best for me as a German who has lived in California for a long time and also straddled these two worlds, not Britain, but this sort of like cognitive dissonance between these two cultures. That's I think that's what one of the reasons why it appealed to me so much. You kind of you're wrapping this you're wrapping this sort of this fluffy weird sandwich with this bad tasting mayonnaise into a really nice I don't know. Oh
Yeah.
God, I'm
No, I mean I
that's why I'm
understand
not
what
a
you're saying.
writer. I
That's
can't
what
think
I
of
was trying
the
to do.
yeah.
And like everything in this, you know, cultural appropriation aside, like it's everything's a mix. You know, these characters are all of a mixed background, and the sensibility of the book is a mix of American sensibilities and British sensibilities. Like it's all supposed to be you know, humanity interthatching itself in all of our sensibilities, and that's very much what I tried to do. Uh,
Space Opera is the book. Catherynne M. Valenti and my left controller is making weird things here. I'm trying to pick up the book. Life is beautiful. Life is stupid. Where are you? It's all on the floor. Um, Last question. We're running out of time. You signed a movie deal. Are you terrified, afraid, or do you not care what they do with this movie? How do you feel
Oh,
about this?
of
I'm
course I
always
care.
thinking here's my little thing with all my American friends. The never ending story is the one of the most important books, I guess, fantasy, young adult books, whatever you call
Is
it.
to me, yeah.
Uh, and of course, my American friends are mainly mainly know the film, and the film is fine. But Michael Ende, the author of the
Well,
book,
and of
was
course, it's a
deeply.
German book.
That's right. But Michael Ende, the author, was incredibly insulted by the film because it just basically picked like one tiny thing,
Yeah.
and I who adored this book. I actually think everybody in Virtual Worlds or Second Life needs to read this book because I think that's what it describes. Anyways,
I'll tell you what, it was the first book that I read that wasn't like a little kid's book.
oh
I
my
read it when
God,
I was very young. It is a very important book to me.
look at that. How, are you afraid that they take this child of yours and make it into a
Uh,
investment banker?
oh God, they're not going to do that. But so I mean, here's the thing about the Neverending Story movie. Like, I agree with you that it is not the book. I mean, it ends like a third of the way through the book for one thing, uh, but it's still a movie that meant a lot to a lot of people.
Right.
If they do that to space opera and it's still a movie that means a lot to a lot of people, I'll be okay. I
Yeah.
understand about adaptation. I'm a huge movie nut and have been my whole life, and so is most of my family. I understand how it works.
Yeah.
I hope things are a little different now, because the fans are so vocal that people do tend to be a little more loyal to the source material than they used to be to avoid that kind of outcry. I hope that uh,
And that may
I hope
translate
I hope
into
that
the
I
the.
hope that people
Mhm.
stay not white. I hope that they stay English. Do
Okay.
I have total confidence that that's going to happen? No, I don't. But I don't have any control over it. And like part of part of the zen of being an author is that once you have written that book, it is no longer just yours. It belongs to everyone. It is no longer just a part of me. It's a part of everybody, and I have to let it go. So I hope for the best. I've had conversations with the producers, and they got all my references and seemed really on the same page with me. It's Hollywood, so will that page get turned? Probably. I understand that if some A-list actor wants to play Decibel, that will probably happen. Whether or not I would pick them for the part, I know how it works. So I just hope that it. I just really
Hollywood,
hope
please
everybody.
take actors
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
same ethnic background. Please, just that thing,
Or
just
close.
close.
Rami Malek can play Death. That's fine. It's nearby.
Uh,
Like, I mean, I have my picks. Like for the various parts, they have not asked me, and I'm sure that they won't. But I am trying to take a Zen approach. The book will always exist, no
yeah.
matter like even if the movie is just back to back white Americans. The book and who Decibel and Ort and Mira are still exists. The book will never stop being the book. And if the greatest part of a movie is it makes so many more people read the book. So
That's a really healthy. I admire you. I
I
applaud you for this very
so just remember
practical.
that I said that
Yeah.
when
When
it
you
gets
go
cast, and I
exactly,
have to.
and then when you get into a tweet storm at 3 in the morning, go
I
like,
know,
"You
I know.
mother,
Look,
bleep,
I
bleep, bleep."
literally have zero control over it. So, like, it's not my fault. But I really like these people. I genuinely like them, and they seem very committed and uh, very into all the things that I am into. So
Yeah.
everybody keep their fingers crossed.
Awesome. Thank you. A couple of notes here, and then we're going to wrap it up. Eleanor E. Cayman Sands, who is herself a really great author, she says, "We won the Eurovision contest in 1997. We have no feelings quite true.
Yeah,
Our
I
books
graduated from high school in 1997. That doesn't mean I'm going to graduate from high school again anytime soon.
Our books don't cross the Atlantic too well unless we do humor." And then she says, 1997, love you, Katrina, and the love Shine a Light by Katrina and the Waves. And
Mhm.
Mayeki is asking here, is this the movie deal? Is this the big screen? Oh yeah, this is definitely the big
Yep,
screen.
it's a feature.
I don't think that Universal does movies for Vimeo at this point. Let's see here. Awesome, thank you, Kat. What else is there? Yeah, that's it, Catherine. I'm gonna go back in with my headset here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here
Thank you.
and good luck to your unborn child. May the unborn
Thank
child
you.
be read to the unborn child, your partner, please, with his wonderful
Oh,
Australian
he
accent.
does.
Read to the stomach every day. That's what we did. We actually played Frank Zappa. I think that's why my son hates Frank
Oh, I
Zappa.
have a playlist. I have a little playlist that I put the headphones over my belly and play it.
Good. That's the way to do it. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for hanging out in 114 Harvest. We're back with what is today? Friday. Tomorrow, Atlas Hopping, 11 a.m. Sunday, Hover Derby, 11 a.m. Well, as I have no life, I'll be here in my basement. Thank you, Catherine, and have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
weekend.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye. And we're cutting to the interstitial little thingy, which I can't find because I'm utterly an amateur. Um, that was absolutely wonderful. The book is available in well, in Germany. It's available only as a hardcover, which is, let me actually see here. Simon and Schuster. Yeah, it's hardcover. I think in the US it's already available as a paperback. I should bring down the audio. Space Opera is the book. Catherynne M. Valenti is the author, and like I said, this is the first book that I read, but it's awesome, awesome. Thank you guys for watching. Daisy, Juice Jam. I think Daisy should be on this show. Daisy is I enjoy Daisy's writing a lot, and this show is about inviting people who I like. I was gonna a couple of housekeeping notes. This was of course streamed not from 114 Harvest. This is streamed for different reasons, primarily lag issues, just to be kind of secure in that from an undisclosed location. And this will go on the podcast on Monday as an audio only, slightly edited, cleaned up audio podcast on draxfiles.com. Yeah, and that's it. And I think I'm gonna go to Amazon and get some more of Catherine's books. That's it, folks. The music is from the Our Digital Self soundtrack, by the way. Universal? Universal, are you listening to this? How about hiring me to do the soundtrack? Okay, bye guys. Thanks for watching.
We're all thrown into it, one way or the other. We all try to steer it as straight as we can. Sometimes we collide with each other. Who is to blame? And who's gonna fix the boat? Life, oh life, there's nothing to fear from your life. Let me know if I can be of any help. Life, you and I, let's try a fresh start today. What do you say? Let's close the door on the past. So we swim, and it is in so many ways just a little trick to keep our heads above water. But now I'm not afraid anymore. Life